Right, so people ask me how I clean up and how I recycle my clay. So today I will do a demonstration. Since I'm throwing very dry, so I don't have much to clean up, but I just want to show you how I clean up too. These are all the tools I use. First, if you have lots of clay or slip of water in the splash pan, the easiest way is get a good sponge and then just use the bucket of water. You don't need to go use the fresh water yet. Using your throwing water, if you still have water in your bucket, use a nice sponge, just wipe. Okay, you wash your sponge first and then just wipe off your fingers, clean it up. So that's the first step. And then if you have lots of clay inside your splash pan, you do the same thing. Just use a sponge and then wash your sponge first and then clean and then squeeze out the water and use that sponge to just go in to your splash pan. And then if you have lots of water, kind of absorb it, okay, and squeeze it out. Okay, so clean up your wheel and also the tools. Again, use the sponge to wipe it off. It's very easy. The metal rib, the wooden knife, the pointing knife, or you could use a needle tool, the wooden rib, sponge, and the back gripper, or you call it the absorber, clean up. And the chamois. Okay, so that's the cleanup. Also can clean up your bucket. And usually I don't go to the sink and wash out everything. I just leave the water inside. When the next day I have something to trim, all the trim, the clay, you can just scoop it up and then put it in the bucket, okay? And until you fill the bucket, then you can dump it in a larger bucket and wait a couple more days. Once the clay soak in all the water, they got soft enough, and you scoop it out and you put it on the plaster to dry it for depending on the weather. You probably could get it maybe next day or 2 or 3, depending on how dry or how hot your weather is. And then just use the clay and you wedge it. Once it's dry, you can recycle it. So that's my whole process. I didn't even have a trap underneath of my sink, because that's the whole process. I first wash it thoroughly on my bucket, and then after I accumulate enough clay, I just dump it in a larger bucket for the clay to be recycled. Use a new fresh clay. So the key is stay clean here, so that you don't have too much slip in here. Okay, so use water more efficiently. You don't need to use a sponge to squeeze a lot of water and the water is going there, okay? So just put it enough water on your clay. It's very easy to clean up. It's very easy to recycle it too. My sink has been sitting there for more than 20 years and I don't have any problem with my pipe because I wash thoroughly everything, clean up, and then do the final rinse on my tap water in my sink, and that's all. Right, so the stuff that I trim, I usually put it back into the bucket with the water, and then until I fill it up, I just dump it into the larger bucket so that I don't have a waste clay. And you can see that this is almost full. So I'm going to dump it into a larger bucket and then wait for a couple days and then scoop it out and then let it dry. So this is the larger bucket. I've been collecting all the clay that has been trimmed. So I'm going to just dump it here. So after dump it in, I'm stirring a little bit so the water and clay can mix a bit better. And I can leave this lid open for a couple days so let the moisture come out more, and then I will scoop it out. So after giving it enough clay that has been recycled and put it in this bucket, I'm going to scoop it out and then let it dry for overnight, maybe, depending on the weather. And just put it on the plaster board so that it absorbs the water. Now the slip is kind of thin, so later on I could scoop more and put it on. That way I can recycle more clay. But now just let it sit because it's so thin, so it's my overflow. Later on I will add more clay to that. And then tomorrow when it's dry, I could remove it from the plaster board and then put it on the wedging table and wedge it. Right, so the recycled clay has been drying for one day, and I can see it's kind of moving up, and it's a bit drier already, and I can pick it up without putting it on the dry wall, the dry board. And here's another one, and still the middle part is still wet, but I can pick it up and slightly wedge on my wedging table. So this one is a little bit less clay, so it's a little bit drier than this one. I have more clay on the other one, so but I'm ready to wedge it on my dry board so that I could recycle the clay. Still in the middle section is still wet. So you see that clay is still soft, but it's manageable. And usually you could hang your clay like this, like making a small dome and small arch actually, so that the air can go through there and they will dry more evenly. And if you leave it untouched for maybe half of a day, you should be able to come back and wedge it. But now it's almost in the nighttime, so I wouldn't leave it like that for overnight. It would be too dry, so I will probably cover it a little bit and tomorrow and let it dry a bit more, and then I can re-wedge it. So I don't want to dry it on the drywall. It's absorbing water. So I'm just put a piece of a bed and place right on top of it. 30 in the afternoon, and the clay is getting more drier. So I'm ready to wedge it on the table here. So in case there is some big chunk, because when you put in all the clay, recycled clay into the bucket, some of them might be a little bit drier than the others, so you might have a little bit of a chunk. So to avoid having the chunk is harder than the rest of the clay, you can do this. Just get a wire and try to cut it. I think this is pretty good. I don't feel anything that is a chunk. That's pretty good. Let's cut it and let's see how the inside look. So inside looks good. I don't see any chunk. Right, so that's the recycling of the clay, and once it's getting hotter, you can just go right back to the wheel and throw. Now it's still a little bit soft. Just put it in the plastic bag and throw it maybe next day. Alright, so that's the recycling of the clay, and you don't have a waste and you don't get clog your water pipe.